For the first time in 6 months, Monty Frank and Emily and Matt Roeder are meeting.
But the fact is we have two people here who are absolutely grateful for the teamwork that we did.
I mean, there's so many people that helped.
Last summer, they worked together to save now retired Richfield Fire Chief Wayne Kewitsch's life.
And to see him today, I knew this was going to happen. But
an overwhelming reunion.
It is a wonderful experience.
I've known Monty for about 15 years, and when he walked into the station this afternoon, it was really an emotional experience.
And Emily and Matt are just a godsend. They're our guardian angels.
On August 21st, Ruth and Wayne Kewitsch were heading north for a weekend with friends at Cross Lake. Wayne was behind the wheel on Highway 169.
It all happened very rapidly. I got lightheaded, and everything went gray and just kind of went down to a pinpoint, and that's the last thing I remember.
And I saw that Wayne was unconscious behind the wheel. Lots of thoughts went through my head real fast, but the first one was, he's in cardiac arrest. And I knew that because I witnessed his first cardiac arrest on July 1st in our home. So I, with God's help, I think, I grabbed the wheel and I steered right and said a little prayer, and we landed in a cattail swamp about 40 feet in.
Did you even have time to think about where you were headed?
Nope. And I was like, I just got to get off the road because I don't want to hurt anyone else.
Driving behind them, watching it all, by chance, were Emily and Matt.
And I just looked at my husband and I said, you need to pull over.
Emily is a nurse at Mercy Hospital in Coon Rapids.
Before he could even stop the car, I was getting out and telling him to call 911 and running through this swamp.
It was a gift from God. I was like, you go, girl, because she just took over the scene and she ran it and she knew exactly what she was doing, and then she kept looking at me saying, breathe, breathe.
I just knew, you know, okay, he needs chest compressions and he needs them now. You know, the unfortunate thing was that we were in the middle of a swamp and where do you do chest compressions? And so I just kind of looked at the situation and said, well, I'm going to do them right here.
As Matt was calling 911.
You know, I remember yelling for him. You know, I hear the sirens. I was telling him we need an AED. Someone needs to bring down an AED.
This is our AED.
Monty Frank, the emergency management coordinator for the Mille Lacs Band of Ojibwe, rushed that life-saving device to the scene. Monty not realizing at first who the patient was.
Until we were doing compressions, and then Ruth said, this is Wayne of Richfield Fire. We do good care in any patient, but this turns out to be a brother and sister in the fire, EMS, and emergency management world. And it's just, you just get so focused on providing good quality care.
Strangers now working as a team against the clock. They used the AED to shock him several times. Other first responders now on scene too, together successfully reviving him.
So I had been in cardiac arrest for probably about 15 minutes at that point.
Ruth, what were those 15 minutes like for you? Do you remember it?
Yep. I relive it a lot. I probably shouldn't, but I was planning his funeral at one point. How do I get his body home? And the 7 shocks were bad. And to see him just lifeless. And I was holding his hand, you know, unless they were shocking him, of course. I wouldn't want anyone to go through it.
She was by his side as he was rushed to the hospital in Onamia in an ambulance. Then he was airlifted to the University of Minnesota Hospital, surviving, beating the odds a second time. Within a day, Wayne was on the phone.
And for myself to get that call on Saturday from Wayne, thanking us that he was still with us, is one of those rarities.
And about a month later, Emily and Matt were finally able to see Wayne.
Yeah, it was just...
The first big hug, you could just feel the love.
Yeah, we all were just shaking. And
the Kewitsches say they're grateful so many were willing to help.
For me to be able to thank them personally is incredible.
We want to be here without
it, yeah, no.
Urging others to learn CPR.
Don't hesitate. Be an Emily. Don't hesitate. Jump in. get through that swamp and to help someone.
Just, I feel so fortunate that I knew what to do.
And he is here with us today. That is an amazing story and an amazing gift that I think that all of us who were there on scene will put that in a shelf of saying, this was a good day.
Everything fell into place with the right people being there at the right time and with the right knowledge of how to help him.
Well, today, State Patrol presented Emily with a Meritorious Citizenship Award, saying due to the remote location of that crash, they believe it's unlikely he would have survived if not for her quick actions performing CPR. We know from the American Heart Association that immediate, effective bystander CPR can double or even triple a cardiac arrest victim's chance of survival. And in rural Minnesota, as Monty told us, time and distance are certainly a challenge.
And thank goodness they stopped and helped. Do they know why Wayne had 2 cardiac arrests?
So when he was flown to the U hospital, he was actually treated by the same doctor as he was after that first cardiac arrest. But they still don't know why it happened again. He has an implanted defibrillator in his chest now to prevent this, hopefully, from happening again. If it detects anything unusual, it will alert the U. Peace of mind there with that.
Wow.
Get off of him now!
This video from May 25th, 2020 sparked outrage around the world.
And we have a duty to fight for our freedom!
And for the first time in court, the then 17-year-old who took it, Darnella Frazier, described what that day was like, walking to cup foods and sending her younger cousin inside.
Was there anything about the scene that you didn't want your cousin to see?
Yes.
And what was that?
A man terrified, scared, begging for his life.
Only Frazier's voice could be heard as she described how what happened to George Floyd has affected her life.
When I look at George Floyd, I look at my dad, I look at my brothers, I look at my cousins, my uncles, because they are all black. I have a black father, I have a black brother, I have black friends. And I look at that and I look at how that could have been one of them. It's been nights. I stayed up apologizing and apologizing to George Floyd for not doing more and not physically interacting and not saving his life. But it's like, it's not what I should have done. It's what he should have done.
Speaking about Derek Chauvin.
Well, it's an unforgettable moment. I think even over the course of a lengthy trial, probably many of that moment will stick with many of the jurors.
Frazier was one of 4 young witnesses who testified Tuesday. One was as young as 9.
And we heard children saying they could tell he was dying. I think almost anyone watching that trial felt that this was a powerful day and a successful day for the state's efforts to show that this was not a split-second situation, this was not an emergency, this was an avoidable death.
Are you really a firefighter?
Yes, I am from Minneapolis.
Okay, then get on the sidewalk.
New cell phone video was introduced. Taken by Minneapolis firefighter Genevieve Hansen, who happened to walk by the scene on her day off.
I got there and I could have given medical assistance. That's exactly what I should have done.
Why weren't you able to do any of that?
Because the officers didn't let me in to the scene. I also offered, in my memory, I offered to walk them through it or told them, if he doesn't have a pulse, you need to start compressions, and that wasn't done either.
Were you frustrated?
Yes.
Part of her 911 call to report the incident played in the courtroom.
And I literally watched police officers not take a pulse and not do anything to save a man.
But Derek Chauvin's attorney, Eric Nelson, questioned her reaction on scene.
Do you think it would make your job fighting the fire harder if someone started yelling at you and telling you that you were doing it wrong?
I'm very confident in the training that I've been given.
Would it have been reasonable to assume that medics had already been called based on what you saw when you first arrived?
Yes.
depending on your perspective as a juror, you may very well find Ms. Hansen the most compelling in that she has medical training and she was specific about the help she wanted to provide, and the police would not let her.
Where does Derek Chauvin's attorney Eric Nelson go from here?
Well, his obvious strategy today with all of the witnesses was to try to build up a scene of chaos, to suggest that perhaps the police were distracted from providing care for Mr. Floyd because so many people were yelling at them.
Now, Rachel Moran there says, however, Nelson did not seem to make much progress today. Based on his opening statement, she says it's possible he will lean more on the expert testimony still ahead. We heard Nelson lay out yesterday that he will argue Floyd's death was due to heart issues and drug use. It's also worth pointing out Nelson did not cross-examine 2 of the young witnesses today, including Kevin, that 9-year-old. As the sun set on the state capitol steps.
If you knew her, you knew the sunshine that twinkled in her eyes.
Dr. Michelle Chestovich gathered with loved ones and friends to remember her sister, Dr. Gretchen Butler, a radiologist.
She was an amazing woman, and she was a bright star that burned out too soon.
Dr. Butler died by suicide in March.
How could this happen on our watch? And what I want people to realize is that this can and does happen, and we all need to take care of ourselves and look after our colleagues.
It's estimated each year 300 to 400 doctors nationally die by suicide, a rate that is more than double the general public, according to the Council of Residency Directors in Emergency Medicine. Just a few months after Dr. Butler's death, in July, another young Twin Cities mother, Dr. Radhika Snyder, died by suicide.
We're seeing a huge tipping point right now.
Shireen Sakizada McConnell has been helping doctors, nurses, and others in the field access mental health support during the pandemic.
Physician burnout and healthcare, mental health, it's always been an issue even prior to the pandemic. I think that what we're seeing is that the pandemic was sort of the last straw. And after wave and wave of caring for some of the most critically ill patients that any provider, any healthcare worker has ever seen in their careers.
A growing number of healthcare workers have reached out to her nonprofit Minnesota Mental Health Advocates, which creates a list of services that are covered by that person's insurance, breaking down barriers to mental health support at a critical time.
It's more than burnout, it's more than compassion fatigue. This is trauma, and it's not sustainable.
Sakizada McConnell understands the toll trauma can take over time, especially while working the relentless schedule so many in healthcare have.
I'm really lucky to be alive.
She experienced a significant trauma on the job several years ago while working as a nurse.
I was really struggling and I was diagnosed with PTSD.
And she says she wasn't able to reduce her workload due to staffing concerns then.
I could have been Gretchen. I could have been Radhika. And I'm so overwhelmed sometimes when I hear people, when I do these intakes and I speak to them, because I can hear it in their voice. I know exactly what they're feeling. I think that we need change within the culture of healthcare. And so that starts with giving people permission, giving them a safe space to tell their stories.
As I personally have gone through a lot of struggles.
Joining in that work is Dr. Kelly Lise Stecker, who founded her own organization during the pandemic, Patient Care Heroes, creating a platform to tell those stories.
The biggest thing I wanted people to realize is we're human.
And provide support.
So I wanted to make sure we had a safe haven for people.
In Minnesota, the Board of Medical Practices has been asking about mental health history when a doctor applies or renews their license. Dr. Lise Stecker says this can deter some from seeking help.
I wanted to make sure that we could provide them with resources where they didn't feel like their licensure was at jeopardy, because a lot of times people fall kind of into that dark place and even consider suicide when they feel like their career is at jeopardy. Thankfully, we are changing some of that language. However, the stigma around mental health continues.
Real systemic change is needed.
Dr. Chestovich wants to see limits on work hours, mental health supports built into healthcare programs, and more conversations to end the stigma.
My dear sister Gretchen continues to whisper in my ear, keep talking. We need to make some changes.
Now, just on Saturday, the Minnesota Board of Medical Practices did approve changing the language on those physician license applications and renewal forms to remove the reference specifically to mental conditions. Now, it instead asks physicians a more general question. The board's executive director tells us they do plan to have more conversations about possible future amendments. Paul?
Callan, it is so important, and for anyone watching, we want to make it clear there is hope and there is help available.
That's right, and that was the message here tonight. We want to make sure that anyone who is in crisis right now has the resources they need. If you need help in this moment, you should call 1-800-273-8255.